Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show on this second day of 2022. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan coming to you from the National Weather Service on a very active weather day across the state. A lot of things to talk about. We got strong high winds affecting the area, creating blowing and drifting snow, frigid temperatures settling in back across much of the mainland and pressing southward. If you're an otter, you want to be in a hot tub with an anchor because we've certainly had some very high winds to report. And if you'd like additional weather information, you can always go online to weather.gov. And if you click on Alaska, the state map there below in the lower left of your screen, it'll bring up the Weather Service offices and areas of Alaska. You can zoom in on the forecast as well as the warnings, watches, and advisories. And you can do this for any other part of the country by simply clicking on the map. Let's take a look at what we got out there. As I was saying yesterday on New Year's Day, that Gulf flow and then a building area of high pressure along the north slope into the Yukon is creating a strong pressure gradient, producing these high winds and allowing the cold air to press southward. We've seen very powerful winds along the Alaska range and southward through south central areas and into the Panhandle and along the Gulf Coast. We're going to see some very cold air here this first week of 2022 as that Arctic air spreads southward. In fact, I think as the center of that high builds close to 1060 millibars over the Yukon, some of the areas along the Alcan border, the normally cold spots, say like Chicken, Northway, up toward Eagle, Arctic Village, you could see lows of 50 to 55 below zero. So quite cold. On a different note, the quadrantid meteor shower will be peaking overnight this Sunday night into the pre-dawn hours of Monday morning. I'll talk more about that in a moment, but let's look at some webcam images. We see the blowing snow, Isabel Pass, under a blizzard warning until 9 o'clock this Sunday evening. The Glen Ellen Highway also to at least 6 o'clock. They may extend that. There's been considerable blowing and drifting snow in these areas. Palmer, they had a peak wind gust of 82 miles an hour this Sunday morning, causing scattered power outages. Very strong winds coming down there through the lower Susitna and Matanuska valleys into the Anchorage Bowl. And as we look off toward the west there, Aniak has been breezy, clear and cold. The mid-afternoon temperature around 10 below, and they're going to see sub-zero temperatures really dropping down here the next couple of mornings, but good spot to view the meteor shower later tonight, and especially before sunrise Monday morning. And around Juneau, the Taku winds are really ripping there. They've had a wind gust up to 71 miles an hour, but as we go up to down the lower end, the south end of Lynn Canal, peak wind gust Naked Island up to 89 miles an hour, and Sheep Mountain 101 mile per hour wind gust, and we have high wind warnings continuing there in the Juneau area till at least 9 p.m. Monday evening, and for around White Pass until at least noon on Tuesday. So looking at the advisory warning watch map, we have wind chill advisories along the eastern Arctic coast, wind chill warnings for the Yukon Flats, Fort Yukon. Fairbanks has a wind chill advisory, but also an air quality alert that will run into at least Monday early afternoon. A high wind chill warning along the north side of the Alaska range, the Tanana Flats, and up toward Fort Greely and Delta Junction. And then the blizzard warning still in effect there for the south side of the Alaska range and in along the Glen Ellen and Richardson highways. That may be extended, may not. So you can check that out a little later. Otherwise, we have high wind warnings down in through the lower Matanuska Valley and the Anchorage Bowl. And strong gusty winds will continue overnight. Also, wind chill warnings in effect along the west arm of the Alaska Range, going down into the southwest interior on the west side of the Alaska Range, including Aniak as well as Dillingham, and also as we drop down into King Salmon. Now off into the east side there of the state, into the Panhandle, as I mentioned, high winds warnings will continue in the Juneau area through at least 9 p.m. on Monday. And here is the wind forecast coming up, and where you see these enhanced areas of the purplish white, that's those blowholes of the northeast winds pouring out of these channels there along the coast. Near east there Gustavus, also just east of Yakutat, also just east of Cordova, coming down the length of Cook Inlet. So some very strong winds that may gust at times to hurricane force, and they will slowly begin to come down as we go through latter half of Monday and into Tuesday. So we still have plenty of windy conditions to go here overnight and at least through Monday morning and early afternoon. So we got a lot of things going on up in the sky. New moon occurred today on Sunday, January 2nd. The quadranted meteor shower peaks in the pre-dawn hours this coming up Monday morning. In a number of areas, we'll see clear skies, though it could be rather windy with bitter cold wind chills. You could see as many as 1 to 2 meteors per minute in the radiant of the shower. The meteors appear to come from a location that will be between Arcturus and the Big Dipper. And another thing is, Earth is at perihelion in its orbit. We will be at our farthest point in the Earth's orbit. It happens in early January this year on the 3rd, 91.4 million miles, compared to aphelion, which is 94.5 million miles in July. So again, we're actually farthest from the sun in July, and that just has to do with our orbital mechanics. But looking at the satellite imagery, you can see the circulation of a couple low pressure systems out over the central Gulf down into the North Pacific. You combine that with the high pressure that is building from the North Slope and Brooks Range into the Yukon. It's creating a very tight pressure gradient. Here is the map, the surface map for this afternoon, and you see those two lows down there in the Gulf with the high pressure above 1,050 millibars, a couple of high centers up there in the northern parts of the state beginning now to spread southeastward into the Yukon. Further west, stalled out front where the Arctic air is buckled up against some milder Pacific air there, North Pacific air. And as we go through tonight, we expect the lows to continue to sit and spin, but they're going to be in the process of weakening there in the lower Gulf and North Pacific. Meanwhile, the highs up there to the north will be continuing to build. The center will be building into the Yukon so that by Monday afternoon, it'll be up around 1056 millibars, a very strong Arctic high. That's going to set up very cold conditions where winds can become calm. Where winds hold up, you're going to have dangerously cold wind chills, as cold as 65 below zero. And we can see the lows there on Monday afternoon, and by Tuesday, the lows finally really diminish, and we see at least finally the wind gradient, the pressure gradient relaxing, as will the winds. Still windy though down there if you go down along the Canadian coast through British Columbia. But otherwise, a lot of clear skies across the mainland, so it's going to be a cold period here to start out the new year, at least for the first week. So look at temperatures below zero up there at Skagway and Haines. Look at the interior, 22 below at Glen Allen, 27 below at McGrath. That colder air will continue to spread a little further south as we go into Tuesday. Temperatures not really going to recover much. I doubt Anchorage will get much above 6 at best. And we see other areas remaining below zero across the south central interior, easily 30 below at Glen Allen on Tuesday morning, 10 below there, Skagway, 8 below at Juneau. And we see sub-zero temperatures creeping down, at least the beginnings there of the Alaska Peninsula. And temperatures Tuesday afternoon will remain below zero north of Anchorage, and only in the single digits along the coast and into the northern panhandle. Here's where the lows really start to show up, and some of these are not even cold enough, but 30s and low 40s below will be quite common come Monday morning. We still have some gradient there along and south of the Yukon River and the Alaska Range, so that will prevent the air temperature from being colder, but it's not going to stop wind chills from being down around 55 to 65 below zero. Afternoon highs only in the 20s to low 30s below zero, and then come Tuesday morning, we start to see a hint there as you get down there toward Eagle, Northway, 43, 47 below, could actually be closer to 50 below, and certainly by Wednesday morning could be one of the coldest mornings there along the Alcan border. Temperatures not as cold in the west, though sub-zero in the single digits along the west coast and the western Seward Peninsula. And temperatures Tuesday afternoon will be coldest across east central areas. Some high temperatures may not get above 40 below there along the Alcan border. and manage to get back up in the single digits along the west coast. The interior of the southwest will be chilling out. We're going to see temperatures dropping well below zero tonight, teens and 20s below. And as we go into Monday afternoon, not much recovery, readings staying below zero. You won't see a temperature near or above freezing until you get out through the eastern Aleutians, and then maybe up to near 40 there, ADAC. And for Tuesday morning, lows will be widespread if the winds can fall off, they'll be colder than that up through the Kuskokwim and lower Yukon valleys. Otherwise, lows will generally be in the teens and single digits, extending out most of the Alaska Peninsula. And taking a look, Tuesday afternoon, still sub-zero readings there in the interior, but getting back up near freezing, heading up there toward Cold Bay and southwestward. Temperatures are going to average a little above normal by mid-month. As we approach mid-month, it's looking like a break from these really cold temperatures, and precipitation could average a little above normal across the south and southeast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
It's time now for the aviation weather on this January 2nd, and if you do have a flight you're thinking about here Monday into Tuesday, the big weather story is going to be a strong Arctic high that's building southeastward from the North Slope into the Yukon. In fact, this high is up around 1055 millibars and will be building upwards close to 1060 millibars by the time it gets into the Yukon. And we still have a very strong pressure gradient along and south of the Alaska Range along the Gulf Coast. A lot of turbulence. We've had wind gusts through mid-morning this Sunday as high as 82 miles an hour in Palmer. Between the Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak Island, we've had wind gusts up to 76 miles an hour at East Amatuli Island. So this is a potent system there. Watch out for areas of severe turbulence, especially where you have northeast winds flowing through river valleys or through passes. And looking at the state Monday morning, widespread VFR conditions because of this big Arctic high, and the low that's out over the Gulf continues to weaken and will be pressing southward into the lower Gulf and North Pacific as it fills. But we will still see some pockets of MVFR conditions along some of the passes, especially through the Alaska Range. But by Monday afternoon, widespread VFR conditions across much of the mainland and even into the Panhandle. Though again, there will be some strong gusty winds aloft from the surface to say 5,000–6,000 feet, potentially a bit higher near the Alaska Range. So turbulence will be the main concern. And then into Tuesday morning and afternoon, widespread VFR conditions across the mainland and the Panhandle. In fact, we'll see a lot of clear skies. So past conditions across the North Anaktuvuk as well as Adigan will be VFR on Monday. Lake Clark and Merrill may see a little MVFR very early in the day, but certainly VFR emerging widespread and certainly around any of the areas you fly east or west. Look for Rainy Pass to have a little MVFR in the early morning, otherwise VFR. Same thing at Windy Pass, and as we round up through Isabel heading eastward, MVFR early on Monday, but otherwise VFR conditions are anticipated. Same thing at Metasta, MVFR very early, but otherwise VFR conditions. The main concern across the Alaska Range will be turbulence with those stronger winds as a result of northeast and northerly flow along the range. Tanita, MVFR also becoming VFR, and that'll be the similar case there at Portage, a little MVFR very early, otherwise VFR to rule. Same thing though across much of the Panhandle. VFR conditions are anticipated on Monday. And looking at the freezing levels, we do have Arctic air advancing southward again, and the surface freezing line goes to near Vancouver, British Columbia, through Haida Gwaii, out over the central Alaska Gulf, and then down well south of the Alaska Peninsula into the North Pacific, swinging back up toward the central eastern Aleutians, and then back up along the Kamchatka coast. We do have a little bump of higher freezing levels, 2,000 to 4,000 feet, eastern Russia, as well as off the Kamchatka coast in through the southwest Bering Sea and western Aleutians. Icing threat, not very much as far as just some isolated icing, primarily out over the Gulf between 3,000 and 10,000 feet around that filling low pressure system. And then also up there toward the Chukchi Sea between 4,000 and 9,000 feet, and then another area between 7,000 and 17,000 feet out over the western Aleutians. Upper level jet stream winds at 30,000 feet. We continue to see a low level pressure circulation there along the Panhandle Gulf Coast. But otherwise, it's the winds on the backside of this trough, upwards to 105 knots there near the Seward Peninsula out of the northeast, dropping down across the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians, upwards to 90 knots from the northeast to north. And then looking at 9,000-foot winds, strongest there across the lower Yukon Valley, upwards to 70 knots across the southwest mainland and coming back in along the tip of the Alaska Peninsula to 60 knots. And then 3,000-foot winds, especially west of the Alaska Range through the middle and lower Yukon Valley, anywhere from 50 to 70 knots. That's going to translate to severe turbulence there along the Yukon River Valley, mid and lower Yukon River Valley. Also on the east side of the Alaska Range, Susitna Valley down through Cook Inlet and Shelikof Strait could see some areas of isolated severe turbulence. Also coming out of Yakutat and there near Gustavus there through the strait as a result of those stronger northeast winds. Also an area across the western Aleutians from the surface to 3,000 feet. So if you head out, have a safe flight.
We try to provide everyone with the best forecast we can for snow, sleet, and ice in the winter with as much notice as we can. And we've made great strides in our forecasting over the years. However, given the complexity in winter weather forecasting, the first forecast simply won't be as good as the one closer to the event. As the event nears, our forecasts will become more precise.
Forecasts are updated constantly from days before the event until the precipitation actually begins. If you want the most accurate and up-to-date information, you have to check the forecast frequently.
It's very unlikely that any computer model snow amount forecast, especially days in advance, will be exactly right. Sometimes it's even difficult to forecast amounts the day of the event. Don't focus so much on exact numbers. Our forecast offices produce a range of possibilities available on each office's winter page.
Impacts from winter storms can vary a lot across even short distances, especially true in the terrain of the mountains, but even in areas with more subtle differences in elevation. Just because it's not bad where you are doesn't mean that it isn't bad just a short distance away.
There's often a small area, perhaps not bigger than a couple of counties, of heavy snow embedded within the larger area of precipitation. It is very difficult to pinpoint exactly where this area will occur in advance. That is why we give ranges and probabilities, and that is what we mean when we say isolated higher amounts.
Not all storms are the same. Some storms affect different areas in different ways, and even weaker storms can produce big impacts. The Winter Storm Severity Index is a product that uses threat levels to depict overall anticipated impacts to society due to winter weather.
You can be a citizen scientist. You can report the weather that is occurring at your location any time of day. Local National Weather Service forecast offices offer Skywarn Storm Spotter training, so you can become an official Skywarn Storm Spotter. The MPing app and website allows you to submit your report online. And for the most dedicated, you can join CocoRaws, where you can submit your daily precipitation report directly to the National Weather Service. Your ground truth helps us improve forecasts.
Did you know that a 1 to 2 degree temperature difference either at the surface or just a few hundred feet off the ground can make a big difference in whether we get rain, freezing rain, sleet, or snow? That's really hard to forecast when we don't have a lot of data, but thankfully we do have 92 upper air stations that release weather balloons at least twice a day.
Even if you live in warmer climates, it's important to know your winter precipitation types when traveling. Freezing rain is liquid rain that freezes when it hits the ground, creating a coat of ice on roads, walkways, trees, and power lines. Sleet is rain that freezes into ice pellets before reaching the ground.
Snow squalls are quick, intense bursts of heavy snow that are accompanied by gusty winds. They rapidly reduce visibility and can create treacherous travel. Snow squall warnings are issued for localized areas where snow squalls are expected in the next 30 to 60 minutes. As of December 2019, they are now sent as one of the wireless emergency alerts.
Know the differences between watches, warnings, and advisories. A winter storm warning means that confidence is high that a winter storm will produce heavy wintry precipitation and cause significant impacts. A winter storm watch means that confidence is medium and that a winter storm producing significant impacts is possible. A winter weather advisory means to exercise caution as light amounts of wintry precipitation will cause slick conditions and may impact travel.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and starting with the sea ice edge, we are seeing extensive sea ice along the west coast, but with the strong offshore flow out of the northeast, we're going to see that ice shifting more toward the south and west over the next couple of days, so beware of that along the coastline and out along any leading areas. There could be some dangerous conditions as those strong winds continue to pull the ice away from the mainland. Let's look at the interior here of the panhandle. The inner channels are going to get blasted with strong winds through the day on Monday. Lynn Canal, north winds 55 knots with higher gust, 45 to 55 knot winds there as you go Petersburg up toward Juneau. Lesser winds the south end of the panhandle, but still offshore flows some of the blowholes there between Sitka, Gustavus, and Yakutat out of the east at 50 knots with waves 13 to 18 feet. Tuesday still windy, but not as windy as Monday or Sunday. We're still going to see some gusts though to 55 knots there across Lynn Canal with 8-foot waves, 45 knot gusts there down toward Juneau to Petersburg, and offshore flow out of the east at 30 to 40 knots, especially centered there between Sitka and Gustavus and just south of Yakutat. Across the south central areas, the northern western panhandle there, winds will be out of the northeast at 30 to 35 knots with some gusts possible to 55 knots there south of Cordova. And then down along the middle and lower end of the Cook Canal, we're looking at northeast to north winds 45 knots, waves up to 10 to 15 feet. And then for Tuesday, winds will begin to come down a bit, 25 to 30 knots along the northwestern Gulf, but 20 knots from the northeast there at up through the Prince William Sound, and northeasterly winds to 40 knots there just off of Homer out through the entrance to Cook Inlet. The Kodiak Island and Alaska Peninsula will generally have northerly flow on Monday, 35 to 45 knots, but as high as 55 knots with gusts to hurricane force 75 knots there south of Sand Point between there and Perryville. And then on Tuesday, winds will turn more out of the east-northeast, 30 to 40 knots, waves 10 to 15 feet on the North Pacific Gulf side, and 5 to as high as 14 feet there on the Bering side. And looking at the Aleutian chain, winds will be out of the northeast to eastern Aleutians 30 to 35 knots with waves running in the mid-teens, but as you get west of Adak, picking up to 40 to 45 knot easterly winds and waves 25 to just over 30 feet. Tuesday, winds will continue generally easterly to northeasterly through the eastern Aleutians, and then out of the northeast, 35 to near 40 knots from the mid-Aleutians, Adak and Atka westward with waves 19 to 25 feet. Along the west coast, the ice that is in place, though, we're going to have strong offshore flow from the mainland, cold Arctic air on northeasterly winds, 25 to as high as 45 knots there, down out across the bay and delta there from the Kuskokwim River. And as we go into Tuesday, winds will continue out of the northeast, generally 35 to 40 knots. It'll continue that ice to push south and westward. Open waters could see waves 13 to 16 feet from St. Matthew down to St. Paul and St. George. Along the Arctic coast, winds will generally be out of the west at 5 to 15 knots, Prudhoe Bay to Katovik, but southeasterly along the northwest coast from Utqiagvik down through Port Hope and offshore 10 knots there from Kotzebue. And then on Tuesday, winds will try to turn more southwesterly from Point Lay northward along the Arctic coast, 15 to 25 knots, though still out of the northeast on the west side of the Seward Peninsula and north of Nunavik Island to 35 knots. And here's the weather map overnight into early Monday morning. Low pressure remains there out over the Gulf, building high pressure there along the north slope into the northern Yukon. That's causing that very strong pressure gradient from along and south of the Alaska Range to down along the Gulf Coast into British Columbia. We are continue to see strong winds, though they will not be quite as strong as what they were on Sunday. And that trend will continue for the low to weaken there in the lower Gulf and North Pacific as the high builds there in through the Yukon, so that by Tuesday that high center could be approaching near 1060 millibars, and the winds will not be quite as strong, but still breezy conditions across portions of the southeast interior. And we do expect the cold weather to hold here for this coming week for the early part of 2020. So thank you for watching the show. Once again, I wish all of you a happy new year. Certainly, hopefully 2022 is a better year for many people.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.